Hello and welcome to Raheen's page. This is me, Raheen Fatima, and today we have Gregory Henderson.
Yes.
Hello, how are you, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, Raheen.
Thank you so much. So, can you please introduce yourself for the people who don't know you in the audience?
I would love to. My name is Gregory Henderson. I'm born and raised from Washington, D.C. I currently serve as an educator at a private school in Virginia. I serve as a learning specialist working with seventh grade students who have learning exceptionalities. I'm also a coach. I coach several teams at the school, but also my son's basketball team. I coach soccer, basketball, track, and tennis. And I also do a freelance show on Washington, D.C. sports called the District Sports Report.
That's great. So, you see, and we talked about this earlier as well, that I think that anybody's childhood really affects on who they grow up to be. So, how was your childhood?
Raheen, I was very fortunate to have a very fruitful childhood. I grew up in Washington, D.C., in Northwest Washington. I felt really lucky growing up, to tell you the truth, because I had two parents in my household. I had a lot of friends who did not have the same luxury. At the time, in the late 70s, early 80s, it was a big crack epidemic that hit Washington, D.C. pretty hard and really hit families. So you had a lot of my friends had fathers who were not in the home, locked up, or killed. So I actually felt lucky and almost a little guilty to have my father around. He was a very respected man in the neighborhood. He was gainfully employed. So both my parents were very respected in the neighborhood and really gave me everything I could have imagined as a child. I was the only child, so I got pretty much everything that I could have needed and wanted for the most part. I wouldn't say I was spoiled, but I was definitely didn't want for anything. And because of that, that definitely shaped me as an adult to definitely want to make my parents proud.
Yeah, so when you were small, what were some things that you remember, like some memories that you still carry about your childhood with you now?
Oh, wow. The time that my parents spent with me is something that really resonates. I remember my father coming to all of my athletic games, my mom being very instrumental in my education. I was a very early reader because she did a lot of intervention and time with me, um, kind of developing my academic skills. I remember my father always taking the high road. I was a tough child to deal with at times, very argumentative. And at the end of the day, me and him have very similar personalities and would sometimes really butt heads. But I always remember he would never let me go to sleep upset. He would always come in my room and take the high road and tell me how much he loved me and how much he valued me, and always trying to see in my perspective, seeing my side of things from the argument. And that always resonated with me. And I think that's something I want to pay it forward to my son and being a good father.
Yeah, so your son is also into basketball. Is it because of you? Were you into basketball in your early years?
Oh my goodness. So I was a big sports fanatic. I'm a teacher now, but I had no idea I was going to be a teacher when I was your age, Raheen. I thought I was going to be a sports broadcaster on the news, talking about football and basketball and all sports. Um, I definitely played basketball, football, and tennis when I was growing up. And I definitely put the basketball court outside for my son to play. First couple of years, he didn't touch it. I think I was playing on it more than he was. Um, I can't really credit myself. You know, it was a basketball program I put my son in, and he met up with a coach who really introduced him to the game and made it fun. And so he took on to it. And I think my love for the basketball definitely helped with that. But I can't take full credit. But I'm so happy that my son enjoys a sport that I both enjoy. And it's been a great bonding opportunity for me and him.
Yes, because I was actually going through your profile and I saw very good pictures of you and your son at basketball games. I don't know, was it his games or the other games? And so
Yes.
like it was really memories that you're making. So, how were your teen years? What were you doing at that time? What were your goals? I know it was about, you were all about sports at that time, no teaching, no being a teacher
Yeah,
at that
yes.
time. But
So
how were they?
I'm pretty short in stature compared to professional athletes. So my athletic career fell very short shortly after middle school. Once I went to high school and looked at the size of those guys, I said, okay, I need to find another hobby. Uh, but my high school years, I wasn't the greatest student. I'll admit that. And I think that has actually helped me in my workings with students. I was kind of a coaster, maybe a C student, didn't apply myself as much as I could have, struggled with math. Um, and so I think that really helps me as I work with students now, because what I think is all about, Raheen, is confidence. What I found in working with students who even at seventh grade are reading on a first grade level, if you can increase their confidence, it will play out not only in academics, but in the other parts of their life. So letting them see success, and find value in themselves and build their self-esteem, I think is the most important thing. And I think that's what I've really achieved from or received from my parents growing up. Um, it gave me a lot of opportunities to do public speaking. I spoke in the church, I spoke at schools, really boosted my confidence and my value as a person. So even though I wasn't strong academically and I wasn't going to be any professional athlete, I had a lot of confidence and revering myself as far as being able to speak publicly.
Yeah, so what I really think is that confidence when you are a child is inculcated by your parents and your teachers because they're the ones
Yeah.
who tell you, no, you're the greatest man on earth. You're supposed
Yes.
to do it. So, who really introduced you to the art of learning and then actually inspired you to be a learning specialist?
That's a great question. So ideally, I wanted to be a sports broadcaster, and I very luckily got a job with Discovery Channel, who puts on productions and shows right out of college. After about a year, I got bored. I was administrative assistant. I was just basically answering calls, and I was really looking for something else to motivate me. And I went to a family reunion, and a cousin of mine was actually in the business of hiring teachers for public school. Asked me, was I interested? And at the time, there was a shortage actually in the public schools in my city where some classes had no teachers or had substitutes for a whole year. So you had kids who really needed to learn, didn't have capable teachers in the room to help them with that. So I said, hey, this is summer's off. It was a little bit more than what I was making. Um, it kind of fell into my mantra of trying to make a difference when I came out of college. I said, okay, I'll jump into this classroom and see what I could do. It was a disaster at first. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. Like I said, I had no teacher training. I remember my first day was Valentine's Day, and I can tell you, Raheen, I got no love that day. No love at all. Um, but after a while, after a few weeks of trial by error, um, I found a real love working with students, and especially the students who had learning difficulties. I had students in my class who were sixth grade who couldn't read. So as a teacher, I'm trying to figure out how can I teach them? How can we go through a book and answer questions if they can't even grasp the material? So I had to try to find creative ways for them to learn and find success in class, whether it be communicate their answers orally or to do a lot of using technology through computers, through movies, through documentaries. And that love, that I mean, I was leaving work like fist pumping in the air, like when students got it, when you saw that light bulb go off in their head, or when you saw a student engaged in class where normally they'd be acting out. So, I mean, that feeling was the most rewarding feeling I'd ever got in my life. And because of that, 21 years later, I'm still teaching because I've never been able to get that feeling in any other spot. So that's what kind of got me to learning, and that's what kept me there.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you were teaching normal children, but then you really found your passion teaching children with learning disabilities, or they
Yes,
were special. So,
yes.
what do you think? how were they different? I mean, they were different in reading and writing, but how were their learning abilities different? And what about them really appealed to you that you found your passion there and you're still continuing?
Thank you. So the students that I taught early on had attention deficit disorder, which means they had challenges even sitting down in the classroom in a traditional sense, um, kind of self-regulating. You have students who had dyslexia and dysgraphia, where they had difficulty writing. Obviously, dyslexia is a reading disability, so they had difficulty decoding words and expressing themselves. So how do you students who have been struggling with difficulties like that for years develop coping mechanisms? So if they're in a classroom, students do not like their deficiencies highlighted. So if a teacher is doing an activity where reading is involved and a student can't read, what that student will typically do is act out, maybe get into an argument with a teacher, or start engaging in inappropriate behaviors with another classmate, just to hide the fact that they're not academically adept. And so what I found in my early years of teaching was to give those students a sense of pride in themselves, even though they were struggling academically, that they were still important, that they were still valued in that classroom, and that they still could reach success academically. Even though they weren't at the same level with the students at the time, they could get there through some hard work and through some intervention. So basically having them believe in themselves was first and foremost. And then once they do that, I was able to make some progress with some of those students. But those students, not only were the students happy, but the parent impact as well, because they know how bright their kid is. They know how special their kid is. And for their kid not to realize it in themselves and for teachers not to see that is very hard for a parent. So I found that not only it was important to instill that positivity in the kids, but also to instill that positivity in the parents as well.
Yeah, so how do you think teachers are really an important part of the community, and how do you think they are an important part and they play it?
Oh man, I mean, teachers are vital. Studies show that students are successful when a teacher shows that they believe in them and that they love them and they care for them. You've heard so many nightmares where you have students, especially in the inner city, um, where they're in classrooms where it's 20 kids, 30 kids. Teachers are struggling trying to teach and deal with behavior issues, um, where students will say, a teacher told me I wasn't going to be anything. A teacher told me I would never amount to nothing. Those things stick with kids. Um, but on the other side, if a teacher tells a kid, you're going to be whatever you want to be if you work hard, you are so bright and talented that the sky is the limit for you, that sticks with kids as well. And so teachers play a vital role, because I know myself, I got tired of hearing my parents talk sometimes. And sometimes another voice, even though they're saying the same thing that my parents are saying, but coming from a different person, is very influential. And so teachers are a bridge, and we spend more time with kids than their parents. You know, we're with kids from 8 to 3 and sometimes till 6 o'clock through after school programs. So that's a lot of time to be engaged with a student. And so we play a vital part in a student's development.
And I would really like to say that teachers, I believe, are also the ones who are also acting, when it comes to high school, they're acting as career counselors as well. If a
Yes.
kid is good at, let's say he's good at basketball, you know,
Yes.
tell him that he's good at basketball, talk to his parents, let him know he's so good and that he could actually professionally pursue that, and not
Yes.
just force them to read and write and just study the subject that you're teaching and
Right.
asking him to revise all his tests and everything. Let him do what he wants to.
Yes. So true and so well said. We really have to meet kids where they are, and whether they are up here or up here, and to not push our own agendas on students, but to find out what it is they want out of life, what it is their goals are, what do they want to achieve, and try to support that student in reaching those things. As an adult, you've lived on earth longer than these kids, so you've been through some of the experiences. You are where they're trying to get to. And so you just provide that guidance. And what I found through coaching, not only academic coaching, but through athletic coaching, is asking questions of the students so that they come up with their own answers, and you're not giving them the answers.
Yes, and it's really, really important to first identify the questions and then also find the answers to it. If anybody's an adult, of course, they have more experience on Earth, but if the kid is doing it himself, then he's gaining the experience on being on Earth.
That's right.
So you're also a creator, so could you explain more about how and what you create?
Yes. So I actually was motivated by some of my students. Uh, you see all over the country, students are starting their own TV channels like yourself. Whereas when I was growing up, you had to actually be on a network, a TV station. But today you can have your own TV station. And so when I was young, as I said, I always wanted to be a sports broadcaster and talk sports. And YouTube and these technological advances that we've had give you an opportunity to do so. So it was almost like get off your butt and chase your dream. And I don't know if I'll ever be famous from these videos, but it gives me an outlet. It allows me to be creative. It allows me to share information with my fellow Washington, D.C. residents who enjoy sports. And it's been really, really fun for me. And the positive feedback that I've gotten from people has been amazing and has motivated me to keep going.
Yes, so you also told me that you have been teaching kids with who live in towns which are very high in crime rates or are drug infested. So how was it working with those children, because their mindset is somehow pretty much different than a normal child, and they are
Yes.
living in a very different environment?
Raheen, it was a mind-changing experience. A lot of these students are dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder, stuff that people in the armed forces deal with when they're in war, because they're in literally war zones in their communities where gunshots are going off. They've seen their uncle die. They've seen their father get locked up. They've seen their best friend get killed, or beat up. And so trying to get them into an educational setting where they can focus on reading and writing, where they don't know where their next meal is coming from, or where they don't know if they're going to be able to make it home without getting into a fight, is paramount. I mean, these kids are dealing with so much on a regular basis that sometimes school is just not the first priority. A lot of them are hungry and can't even focus because obviously you need food and nutrition to be really cognitive and to be able to focus. But that's where I actually found my love for teaching. Those students are the best and the brightest because they're dealing with so much and they have so little growing up in impoverished neighborhoods, but they still smile, they're still creative, they still have fun, they still support each other, and they're still just amazing, amazing kids. And you just know that if they had the opportunities that other kids had, they would reach the limits as high as they can go. I would say it's life-changing because I still actually work with a after-school program in Washington, D.C. called Kid Power Incorporated, who does after-school programs for free for students that live in those underserved neighborhoods. So that during that critical time after school from 3 to 6, where students can get in trouble, where parents are still working and are unsupervised, we provide very caring adults to not only keep up with their academic success, but to provide other opportunities like sports, like arts, like field trips, just exposing them to the many things that this world has to offer that they may not get out of their neighborhood initially.
Yes, and so I believe a teacher is so important, but the way the teacher teaches is a lot important as well. So how do you think the teaching methodologies are important for the betterment of the students?
Teaching methodologies are vital. Uh, like I said, first and foremost, as far as the teacher goes, like I said, teaching confidence, knowing pedagogy, being able to cross over genres, from math to music, from social studies to English, like all of those subjects, they intertwine. Um, and so for a teacher to really have a concept of being holistic and making sure that students have all that they need to be successful and feel supported in the class.
Yeah, and it's really really important. So in some schools, and I would say in many schools, the old techniques of lecturing or
Yeah.
testing, that they're still going on and they need to be changed. And so, because you're working very closely as a teacher and as a learning specialist with kids, so how do you think kids are beautiful souls, are so important and gonna make the impact on our society?
Well, history has told us that the youth have been involved in every major change, positive change, um, in history. Just looking at America and the civil rights movement, it was high school kids and college kids that really led the sit-ins and the protests during the civil rights movement. It was a young boy, unfortunately, that got killed by the name of Emmett Till that really galvanized the civil rights movement and really started to push non-people of color to realize that we had a real problem in America with inequality and discrimination and racism. So youth, you hear the cliche all the time that the youth are the future, but it's really the truth. I mean, what we invest in our youth, we'll see that in our country moving forward. So the more we invest, the better our country will be.
And you were talking about racism, and I think it all starts at school with bullying, and then ends up, way more than, becoming the issue of the entire country when those kids eventually grow up. So,
Yes,
in those schools, how did you actually work with kids bullying other kids?
that's a great question. Let me get my charger, make sure we don't lose contact.
Yeah, great.
While we're talking about technology,
Yeah, I mean, the
I don't want it
internet
to
is
die.
crazy these days.
Okay, now we're back. So racism. So the first schools where I taught at, Raheen, is an all-black school, pretty much 90, probably 95 to 98% black, and maybe the other two were Latino. So but the instances of bullying were very rampant. A lot of bullying because kids were coming up in neighborhoods where violence was a acceptable means of conflict resolution. So kids in their neighborhoods, violence was a way of 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 of, uh, of sealing conflict. If there was an argument, if there was a dispute, if there was a disagreement, violence was an acceptable way of solving that. But in school, as we know, that's unacceptable. And so kids had real problems with that in the classroom, where they couldn't get along with a student or they had an inappropriate interaction with the student. Their first reaction was to lash out physically. And so we had a lot of instances with that. Also, kids were battling with low self-esteem. And so, unfortunately, kids, we know through bullying research that kids with low self-esteem, what they try to do is make another kid feel worse to try to make themselves feel better. So that was a big problem in that school. And just trying to, if you build the confidence, if those kids start to feel better about themselves, they were less likely to bully. If they were in a classroom, they felt supported and that a teacher cared for them, they were less likely to lash out and be physical. So those were things that we had to continually work on, and I know they're still working on in the inner city and public schools. But the school I'm at now and the school that I was at previously were schools that are private schools, schools that traditionally weren't built for people of color because we couldn't afford to go there. But now with diversity and inclusion initiatives, these schools are now realizing that their students are served better in a more multicultural environment where they're learning from students from different nationalities, different races, different backgrounds. And so they're doing a better job of providing financial assistance to get those type of students in. And so I was very fortunate to work in a school that was very diverse. And I would say that the school was great in pushing non or anti-racist agendas against all forms of people, whether it be respecting all forms of races, all forms of religions, all forms of sexual orientations. And it was a great environment to be in because everybody was kind of on the same board. really you didn't want to work at that school unless you felt that way, because that was definitely the spirit of the school, kind of the motto of the school, is that we're all valued no matter where we come from, any race, religion, or creed. And so I've kind of taken that to new school that I work now, which is in Virginia, which is another private school, which is people of color are definitely the minority at these institutions, and definitely deal with a lot of microaggressions, deal with a lot of racism, both overt and both underlined. Not, you can't see it so much on the surface, but very much there. And it's tough. It's tough navigating it. But what we can do is just continue to show these kids on an individual level, whether you're Black, whether you're white, Asian, Indian, is to show these kids that you care for them, and that no matter where they come from, no matter what they look like, that you love them, because they're your students. And I think that's the most important part. If we can breed that into our students, they'll breed that into their kids, and we'll create a non-racist world, one kid at a time.
Yeah, so you have worked with kids, of course. And what are some memories that you have of kids? Because, this is like little kids saying Mr. Henderson a lot.
Yes.
And, it's kind of fun, and you're teaching them. And as you told that you were teaching them through sometimes films also, because you used to watch a lot of films,
I
which
did.
I do as well. I have the same thing. I watch a lot of films, but there's always something that you take away from a film, even if it's like a
Yes.
romantic film. You take away
Yes.
something,
You take away
and
something.
if you have enough potential in yourself, and you are enough intelligent to take away something from a normal film, like a regular film, then you could see the potential in yourself. So you had different techniques, but how were some, like, do you have some memories to share from your teaching life?
Oh, wow. I do have one memory that sticks with me. And it's funny because I still see my students today that I taught 20 years ago, and they still call me Mr. Henderson. And they're like in their 30s. It feels pretty weird. It makes me feel very old. Uh, I had a student by the name of Mia. She was academically challenged. She was a student who was who was called a special needs student. She was in the special education program. Extremely sharp, extremely confident. And I'll never forget that she ended up being the valedictorian for the school year that year. And the valedictorian is asked to give the speech at the graduation ceremony in 8th grade. And I will just never forget that moment, because not only did she inspire me, but she inspired all the other kids in the crowd. Because she was a student where being a special education student for a lot of kids is a stigma. Everybody wants to be normal, right? And so students that had this clarification or had this diagnosis, a lot of times didn't like coming to school because they didn't feel normal. They felt like they were less than. They felt like they were inferior. They felt like they couldn't learn or were incapable of learning. And so this student standing on that stage, giving her speech, and me knowing that, I might have had a small, minute impact, and her getting all A's. And it just really, really inspired me. I mean, it broke me to tears. I remember sitting in the crowd that day. And I remember I still see her and keep in touch with her on Facebook today. And it's just such an inspiring thought that nothing else can stop you. Whether you have one leg, whether you have dyslexia, whether you have ADHD, nothing can stop you but you. And as long as you have somebody to believe in you, you're going to be all right.
Yeah. And so this was Sir Gregory Henderson, everybody. And pretty soon we're going to come again with another person with a beautiful stories, and going to share a lot of different stories and thoughts. And thank you so much, sir, for first coming and telling us all about yourself, about your life, and how a teacher could actually make an impact on a lot of people's life. So thank you so much, and thank you, and goodbye, everybody. And thank you so much for watching. To all the audience, it's really great that you guys watch, and thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure.